If you are still naive enough to believe the winner of a war is the country that plants the flag, you are tragically mistaken, because the terrifying reality is that even the victor is nothing more than a glorified debtor to the only true master of the game, the bank that bankrolled the ammunition for both sides. Imagine owning both teams in a championship final. You own the stadium, the tickets, and the broadcasting rights. While the fans tear each other apart in the stands over who will win, you sit back, completely indifferent to the score. Why? Because you know the only truth that matters. It doesn't matter who lifts the trophy. You take all the money. Now, take that logic and apply it to the deadliest game on earth. Replace the football teams with the world's most powerful armies. Replace the stadium with the battlefields of Ukraine, the Middle East, or the trenches of 1914, and replace the ticket sales with national debt. We are taught in school that wars are fought for freedom, for democracy, for national security. We see the flags, we hear the speeches, we mourn the heroes. But the ledger tells a different story. If you look past the patriotism and examine the balance sheets, you will find a chilling truth. Modern war is not a political failure. It is a business transaction. And the winner is never the country with the best generals. The winner is the banking syndicate that issued the loans. Do not believe me? Look at the numbers. Right now, as you watch this video, the global debt clock is spinning faster than at any point in history. The price of gold, the only asset that smells fear, is telling us something is wrong. Look at the chart. That spike is not just inflation. That is the sound of capital fleeing the system before the next phase of the cycle begins. Because the blueprint we are seeing today is not new. It was invented in 1815, it was perfected in 1917, and it is being reactivated right now with a $500 billion price tag in Eastern Europe. In this video, we are going to deconstruct the war financing blueprint. We will show you why the most dangerous weapon in a conflict is not a missile. It is an interest-bearing loan. To understand the trap we are in today, we must return to the moment it was conceived, June 18th, 1815, the London Stock Exchange. The fate of Europe is hanging by a thread on a muddy field in Belgium called Waterloo. Napoleon Bonaparte is facing the British Duke of Wellington. The stakes could not be higher. If Napoleon wins, the British Empire collapses. Its government bonds called consols will become worthless paper. If Wellington wins, Britain rules the world, and those bonds will skyrocket. Every banker, every merchant, every king in Europe is desperate for news, but standing in the shadows of the exchange is one man who does not need to guess. Nathan Rothschild. The Rothschild family had built something more powerful than an army, an intelligence network. While the British government relied on slow ships and exhausted horses, the Rothschilds utilized secret couriers and carrier pigeons. Information was their currency. And on that foggy morning, hours before the official government messenger arrived, Nathan received a secret code from the battlefield. Napoleon had been defeated. Nathan knew the truth. Britain was safe. The bonds were about to explode in value. He could have walked into the exchange and bought everything. He would have made a fortune. But Nathan Rothschild did not want a fortune. He wanted an empire, so he did the unthinkable. He stood at his usual pillar. He made his face look pale, defeated, and he began to sell. The crowd watched him. They knew his network was faster than the king's. If Rothschild was selling, it meant Napoleon had won. Panic swept the floor like a virus. "Rothschild knows," they whispered. "Wellington is dead. Sell! Sell everything!" Prices crashed. The value of the British Empire collapsed in minutes. Men dumped their life savings, terrified that their country was bankrupt. And then, at the very bottom, when there was blood in the streets, Nathan gave a subtle signal to his agents. While everyone else was selling, the Rothschild agents quietly bought. They bought everything. They scooped up the entire debt of the British Empire for pennies on the pound. When the official news of victory finally arrived hours later, the prices rocketed to historic highs. But it was too late for the public. The ownership had changed hands. In a single morning, Nathan Rothschild did not just multiply his wealth by 20 times. He effectively became the landlord of the British government. From that day forward, every tax paid by an Englishman, every duty levied on trade, went partially to pay the interest on the debt Nathan now held. This was not just a clever trade, it was the birth of the blueprint. The lesson was brutal and simple. The real profit in war is not in the victory, it is in the panic. And the most valuable asset you can own is a nation's debt. Fast forward 100 years. The year is 1914. The center of the financial universe has shifted from London to New York. The players have changed names, but the game is identical. In America, a new financial royalty has emerged. The House of Morgan, J.P. Morgan, was known as the American Rothschild. His bank was the bridge for European capital flowing into U.S. industry. When World War I exploded in Europe, America was officially neutral. President Woodrow Wilson famously told the public, "America must be impartial in thought as well as in action." Most Americans wanted nothing to do with Europe's slaughter. But for Wall Street, neutrality was not a principle. It was a problem, or rather, a business opportunity. Britain and France needed weapons. They needed oil. They needed steel. And J.P. Morgan was happy to sell it to them. Morgan became the sole purchasing agent for the British Empire in the United States. For every bullet fired, every bandage used, Morgan took a commission. But soon, the Allies ran out of gold. They could not pay. So Morgan did what any good banker would do. He offered them a credit card. By 1917, J.P. Morgan and his syndicate had loaned over $2 billion to the Allied powers. In today's money, that is an astronomical sum. It was enough to bankrupt the entire U.S. banking system. And that created a terrifying scenario. The war was going badly. Russia was collapsing. The French army was mutinying. If the Allies lost, they would default. If they defaulted, the American banking system faced imminent insolvency. Suddenly, neutrality was no longer a viable business strategy. The syndicate needed to protect their exposure. History textbooks tell you America entered the war because of the Lusitania, but look at the timeline. It is a forensic mismatch. The Lusitania was torpedoed in 1915. America did not declare war until 1917, 2 years later. Why the delay? Because in 1915, the loans were still performing. By 1917, the credit line was maxed out. From a financial perspective, the deployment of American troops served a critical economic function, protecting the solvency of Wall Street. Whether intentional or not, the U.S. government effectively securitized a private banking loss with public resources. But if you think that is cynical, wait until you see how they managed the other side. Meet the Warburg brothers. On one side of the ocean, you have Paul Warburg, an immigrant to America, a banking genius, and the chief architect of the U.S. Federal Reserve System. He is sitting in Washington, advising the American government on how to finance the war against Germany. On the other side, in Hamburg, you have his brother, Max Warburg. He is the head of the Warburg banking dynasty and a chief financial advisor to the Kaiser. He is advising the German government on how to finance the war against America. Think about that. 2 brothers, 2 central banks, 2 opposing armies. While millions of men were slaughtering each other in the mud of the Somme, the Warburg family was not fighting a war. They were holding a board meeting. The allegiance of high finance is not to a flag. It is not to a king or a president. Its allegiance is to the balance sheet. And for the balance sheet, a long stalemate war where both sides borrow massive amounts of money is the perfect business scenario. But the most cynical part of the blueprint did not happen during the war. It happened after the peace was signed, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles. The victors, led by the financial interests in London and New York, imposed a debt on Germany that was mathematically impossible to pay. They stripped Germany of its industry, its dignity, and its ability to generate revenue. Then, they demanded billions in reparations. Why? Why force a bankrupt nation to pay a debt it clearly cannot afford? because it sets the stage for the Ponzi scheme of nations. It was called the Dawes Plan, named after the American banker Charles Dawes. And here is how the mechanism worked. Step 1. Wall Street banks, led by J.P. Morgan, loan massive amounts of money to Germany. Step 2. Germany uses that borrowed money to pay reparations to Britain and France. Step 3. Britain and France use that exact same money to pay back their war loans to Wall Street. Do you see the genius? The money never actually leaves the banker's ledger. It just circles the globe. But every time the money moves, every transaction, every conversion, every loan refinance, the banks take a fee. They collect interest at every stop. It was a perpetual motion machine of profit, greased by the misery of nations. But this cycle created dangerous incentives. To ensure Germany could pay the interest, Wall Street had to rebuild German industry. Companies like IG Farben were recapitalized with American money. And right in the middle of this was the Union Banking Corporation in New York, directed by Prescott Bush. They were managing assets for the very industrialists who were rearming Germany. Why? Because a peaceful, debt-free Germany is not a profitable client. But a rearmed Germany creates a demand for new lending. The blueprint requires a crisis. And if a crisis does not exist, the ledger creates the financial incentives for one to begin. You might be telling yourself, that was 100 years ago. The world has changed. We have oversight now. We have ethics. Do we? History does not repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, in Eastern Europe, the Dawes Plan is rhyming so loud it sounds like a scream. Let us look at the data, not the politics, the data. As of this recording, the World Bank estimates the direct damage to Ukraine at over $176 billion. But the number investors care about is the reconstruction opportunity. That is estimated at $524 billion over the next decade. $500 billion. That is the prize. And who is lining up to manage it? It is not the Red Cross. It is not the United Nations. It is the private capital giants of the 21st century, led by BlackRock. They call it a hybrid ecosystem of reconstruction. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, has been advising the fund. Now, we must be clear. BlackRock is a fiduciary. They have a legal obligation to maximize returns for their clients. They do not rebuild countries out of philanthropy. They do it for yield. The trap is already set. Reports indicate that without massive new cash infusions, Kiev faces a fiscal cliff. They need 135.7 billion euros just to survive the next 2 years. When a nation is desperate, when its back is against the wall, it accepts terms. It pledges its energy grid, its agricultural land, and its future tax revenue as collateral for the loans. And who pays if the bet goes wrong? Look at the European Union. They have issued 90 billion euros in debt to keep the system floating. Just like in 1917, the taxpayers, this time in Europe, are assuming the risk, while the private contracts for reconstruction go to the system. The cycle is closing. War destroys the old assets, the Soviet-era buildings, the old infrastructure. The reconstruction transfers ownership of the new assets to private capital. The $4 trillion cost of the 20th century is being repeated with a $500 billion bill in the 21st. And just like 1917, just like 1815, the public is distracted by the flag, while the value is extracted by the bank. Look at the markets right now. That chart is the heartbeat of the war economy. As long as that line goes up, the financial logic for conflict remains. The sports team owner is still winning. So, the question you must ask yourself is not who is winning the war. The question is who is issuing the debt. When you see a relief package on the news, ask yourself, is this aid? Or is it a mortgage foreclosure disguised as charity? War destroys fiat currency. It creates inflation to pay the debts. History shows there is only one shield that protects you from this cycle: real assets. Assets that cannot be printed by a central bank or confiscated by a treaty. In the next episode, We are going to dig into the raw materials they are fighting over, from the diamonds of De Beers to the lithium of the future. We will expose the owners of the earth. Protect yourself, subscribe, and never accept the surface story.